Soft silver light from the twin moons spilled across the small house where Ethan Cole lived. Inside, all seemed calm, but to a tiny alien maid named Lyra, something felt strange tonight. Lyra was from the Zenari species, small and fragile, with soft blue skin and large glowing eyes. She worked in Ethan's home, cleaning, cooking, and keeping things in order. Humans were still new to her kind, and she found them confusing, too quiet, too strong, and too mysterious. But her master, Ethan, was kind, always gentle, always polite. Still, there was something about him she could not understand. Every night, when the house lights dimmed, Ethan would lock his door and disappear into his study. No sound came from that room, no footsteps, no voice. Nothing but a faint humming that made her ears tingle. Tonight, the hum was louder, deeper, like a strange song that called her name. Lyra stood in the hallway, holding a cleaning cloth. Her heart beating fast. She knew she shouldn't. But curiosity was stronger than fear. She tiptoed closer, her small feet making no sound on the cold floor. The door to Ethan's study was slightly open, and blue light leaked through the crack. She pushed it gently, just enough to see inside. What she saw made her gasp. Ethan was floating above the floor, his body surrounded by swirling light, symbols strange. Ancient ones glowed across his skin like living tattoos. His eyes were closed, but blue fire burned under his eyelids. Around him, the air moved like water, bending and twisting in rhythm with his slow breathing. Lyra froze, afraid to move. The room smelled of metal and thunder, and her skin tingled as if touched by invisible sparks. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Humans could not do this. No one could. And yet Ethan floated there like a being made of light. Then his head turned slightly, and she panicked. She stepped back. The door creaked, and her tail rushed against the metal chair. The sound echoed through the silent house. Ethan's eyes opened, glowing faintly with that strange blue fire. "Who's there?" he said softly, his voice calm but filled with power. Lyra's heart almost stopped. She ducked behind the wall, holding her breath. The blue light dimmed slowly, and after a few moments she heard him whisper, "Just the wind." Then silence again. Lyra waited for what felt like forever before running back to her small room. She climbed under her blanket, trembling. Her mind kept replaying what she saw: the floating man, the glowing light, the ancient runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. She wanted to believe it was a dream, but her skin still tingled. She could still hear that strange hum inside her head. When morning came, she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of human footsteps. Ethan was in the kitchen, dressed as always, calm and normal. He smiled at her. "Morning, Lyra." "You look tired." She forced a smile. "Didn't sleep well, sir." He nodded, unaware or pretending to be unaware of what happened last night. All day she worked in silence, her thoughts chasing the memory. Every time she looked at him, she saw the glowing man from the night before. When she passed the study, the door was wide open. Inside, everything was neat and ordinary. No sign of the blue light, no runes, nothing. But she could still feel something in the air, faint energy that brushed her skin at night. She sat by the window, watching the stars. Her small hands held a cup of warm tea as she whispered to herself, "What are you, Ethan Cole?" She had seen many humans before, but none like him. Something deep inside her told her that his secret was not just dangerous, it was world-changing. And somehow, she was now part of it. The night wind blew softly through the window, carrying the same faint hum again. It came from Ethan's room, low and steady, like a heartbeat calling her name. Lyra's eyes widened as she realized the secret she had discovered was not asleep anymore. It was awake, and it knew she had seen it. The next few days felt strange for Lyra. She tried to forget what she had seen. But every night, the memory came back like a whisper in her head. That blue light, those glowing runes, Ethan floating in the air, it couldn't be real. And yet it was, whenever she passed by the study. She felt a faint vibration under her skin, like invisible waves of energy moving through the air. Ethan acted normal, maybe too normal. He spoke kindly, asked about her chores, smiled when she clumsily dropped a dish. But there was something new in his eyes now, something quiet and unreadable, as if he knew what she had seen, but was waiting for her to speak first. One evening, while cleaning the shelves in his study, she noticed strange markings carved into the wooden edge of his desk, tiny symbols glowing faintly when touched by light. They looked similar to the ones that had shone across his body that night. Her heart raced as she traced one with her fingertip. It pulsed once, and a soft blue spark jumped to her skin. She yelped and pulled her hand back, the spark leaving a small mark on her finger. "Lyra," a calm voice said behind her. She froze, turning slowly, and saw Ethan standing at the door, his face unreadable. "I'm sorry." "Sir," she said quickly, bowing her head. "I was only cleaning." He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You shouldn't touch things you don't understand," he said quietly. Walking closer, the air around him felt heavy, almost electric. I saw you that night," she whispered before she could stop herself. Ethan stopped moving, the silence between them thick and sharp. His eyes, calm and human a moment ago, glowed faintly blue again. He didn't seem angry, but the power inside him felt alive now. Finally, he said, "I thought you might have." Lyra stepped back, her hands trembling. "What are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan smiled slightly, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Something that shouldn't exist anymore," he said. He moved past her, touching the carved runes on the desk, and the whole room seemed to breathe. Blue light filled the space, symbols floating in the air like living things. "These are resonance seals," Ethan said, his tone calm and distant. "They keep the energy stable." "It's old Terran science mixed with something we found long ago." Lyra blinked, not understanding. "Energy? From where?" Ethan looked at the glowing air around them, his eyes soft with memory. "From the stars themselves," he said. "From their death." She stared at him. Confused, he smiled faintly. "When a star dies, it releases not just heat and light, but something else, a pulse that carries its last breath across the universe. Humanity found a way to catch that pulse, to bind it inside living hosts," he continued. "I was one of them." Lyra couldn't believe what she was hearing. "So, you hold the energy of a star inside you?" she asked. "In a way," he said. "But it's not something to be proud of." His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "It's why I left Earth." He turned off the seals, and the light faded. Leaving the room dim again, Lyra stepped closer, unable to stop herself. Why hide it? Ethan looked at her with a sad smile. Because the last time a human used this power, a whole city vanished. Her breath caught, the words sinking in like cold rain. He walked toward the window, the moon's shining on his face. "I made a promise never to use it again," he said. "To live quietly, to be normal." Then he turned to her, his eyes tired but kind. "And now you've seen the one thing I swore to bury." Lyra didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to run, part of her wanted to know more. There was fear in her heart, but also wonder. Humans were supposed to be fragile, ordinary beings, but this one held the energy of dying stars. And yet, he looked at her not with pride, but guilt. That night, as she returned to her small room, she couldn't sleep outside. The wind carried a faint hum again, soft and endless. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a rhythm. And deep inside her, something began to respond. A small spark of blue light glowed at the tip of her finger where she had touched the rune. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Lyra stared at it in the darkness, terrified and fascinated, unaware that far above the planet, hidden ships were scanning the surface, searching for one specific signal, the same signal now glowing faintly from her hand. And in his room, Ethan's eyes opened suddenly, glowing bright blue. He whispered one word into the night. "They've found me." The next morning, Lyra woke with the faint blue glow still shining on her finger. She tried to cover it with cloth, but it shimmered through like light under water. Her heart beat fast if Ethan saw it. What would he say? She wanted to tell him. But something in her gut told her to stay quiet. Ethan looked tired that morning. His eyes dark under the light, he moved slower than usual, as if listening to something far away. When he caught Lyra watching him, he forced a small smile. "Everything all right?" he asked. She nodded quickly, hiding her hand behind her back. "Yes, sir." Everything fine, but it wasn't. Because outside the house, hidden beyond the colony lights, something moved in the shadows. A ship black and silent hovered just above the tree line, its surface rippling with cloaking fields. Inside it, alien mercenaries whispered to each other, their voices low and rough. The starborn signal confirmed, one hissed. "He's here." Ethan stood by the window later that day, feeling the weight of the sky above him. The hum in the air had changed. It wasn't natural anymore. It was being reflected back. Someone out there was scanning him, searching for his resonance. He had been found. Just like he feared, when night came, Lyra finally gathered courage to speak. She walked into his study, holding her trembling hand out. "Ethan," she said softly, "something happened to me." The faint blue mark pulsed under her skin, glowing stronger in his presence. Ethan's eyes widened, the same glow returning to his own. He stepped closer and took her hand gently. The lights in the room flickered as energy moved between them. "You touched the seal," he whispered, "and it marked you." "Marked?" she asked, her voice shaking. He nodded slowly. "The resonance knows you now. It has bonded with your life force." "But what does that mean?" "It means," he said quietly, "if they come for me, they'll find you too." Before she could ask more, the lights outside the house flickered red. A faint rumble shook the ground. Ethan's face turned hard, all trace of calm gone. "They're here," he said, through the window. Lyra saw dark shapes moving among the trees. The mercenaries had arrived, armored figures with glowing visors and plasma rifles. They spread out silently, surrounding the small house. Ethan closed his eyes and exhaled, the blue fire under his skin igniting again. "Stay behind me," he told her. "No matter what happens." The hum of the air grew louder, a deep vibrating tone that made the window shake. Lyra clutched her chest, feeling the same energy respond inside her. She watched as Ethan lifted his hand, and the world seemed to pause. Every light flickered, every sound bent, then silence. The mercenaries kicked the door open, shouting in their language. Blue lightning flashed across the room, freezing them in mid-motion. Their weapons stopped in the air like insects trapped in amber. Lyra stared in awe as Ethan floated slightly above the floor. His eyes blazing, he waved his hand once, and the air exploded outward. Throwing the soldiers into the yard, Lyra fell to the ground, covering her ears. When she looked up, Ethan stood in the doorway, the night sky behind him burning with light. Energy swirled around him like a living storm. His voice was calm, but filled with echo. "You shouldn't have come here." The ground cracked beneath the attackers' feet. Their weapons melted. Their armor peeled like paper. One tried to run, but space itself seemed to bend. He vanished into blue mist. Ethan clenched his fist, and the remaining soldiers were thrown back, as if hit by a silent wave. The forest glowed bright for a moment, then went completely dark when it was over. Ethan dropped to one knee, gasping. The blue glow faded, leaving only faint sparks around him. Lyra rushed to his side, tears in her eyes. "You're hurt," she cried. He shook his head weakly. "Not hurt, just drained." Then he looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. "You shouldn't have touched the seal." Lyra. Her lip trembled. "I'm sorry." "I didn't mean to." He smiled faintly. "No, don't be sorry. It wasn't your fault." He reached out, touching her marked hand. The blue glow pulsed again, and for a moment she saw what he saw. Stars collapsing, energy flowing through endless darkness. A storm of fire and memory. It was too much. And she gasped, pulling away. "What was that?" She asked breathlessly. "My past," he said, "and maybe your future." Outside, the forest burned in silence. The alien ship was gone, but its signal would soon call others. Ethan looked up at the sky, his eyes cold with determination. "They'll keep coming," he said, "and next time they won't stop at the house." Lyra stared at him, her small voice trembling. "Then what will we do?" He turned to her, the faint light returning to his eyes. "We do what humans always do," he said. "We fight back." Night fell heavy over the colony, the air thick with silence. Lyra sat near the window, her hands trembling as she watched Ethan repair a strange metallic device on the table. The blue light around him pulsed slowly. Weaker than before, he looked exhausted, but his eyes stayed sharp, listening for every sound beyond the walls. "They will return," he said quietly. "They always send a second wave." Lyra swallowed hard. "Why do they want you?" Ethan didn't look up, his hands working quickly. "Because the energy inside me wasn't meant to exist. They fear it, or maybe they want to own it." He paused, his gaze lifting to hers. "And now they'll come for you too, because you carry a trace of it." Lyra's small heart pounded, the glowing mark on her finger still bright under the dim light. "I don't want to fight," she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. "No one ever does, until they have no choice." Outside, the wind carried strange sounds, faint clicking noises like claws on metal. Ethan stood and walked toward the door, his movements slow but deliberate. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice calm but heavy with power. Then he pressed his palm against the wall, and blue lines spread across it like lightning veins. The entire house shimmered, cloaked by an invisible barrier. Moments later, shadows moved through the trees, dark figures with glowing red eyes and curved weapons. They weren't mercenaries this time. They were hunters trained to capture Starborn alive. The leader raised a hand, and the soldiers surrounded the small house. Inside, Ethan closed his eyes, whispering a word in the old Terran tongue. The walls pulsed once, then went still. The attackers stepped forward silently, their weapons ready, but as they crossed the invisible line, the ground erupted in a burst of blue light. Energy chains coiled around them, pulling them down. Ethan's trap had sprung. Lyra gasped as she watched from behind the wall. The air outside crackled with sound, blue energy spiraling like a storm. Then gunfire, sharp and deafening. The hunters fired plasma bolts into the barrier, breaking parts of it open. Ethan gritted his teeth and lifted his hands. The air bent again, space folding around him like ripples in water. "Run to the back room," he shouted. "Take cover." Lyra obeyed, but halfway there she stopped, because she saw him lift into the air once more. His body glowed brighter than before, every vein lit with flowing light. The floor shook as energy pulsed outward from his chest. The attackers froze, their weapons flickering uselessly in their hands. Ethan's eyes blazed like suns, his voice booming through the storm. "You wanted the power of the stars," he said. "Now face it." He thrust his hands forward, and the energy burst out in a massive wave. The night exploded into blue fire, the forest lighting up as if it were daytime. One by one, the hunters vanished, erased in silence. Lyra shielded her face from the light, her small frame shaking. When the brightness faded, she saw Ethan collapse to the floor, his breath shallow. She ran to him, kneeling beside his body, his skin burned hot, glowing cracks spreading across his chest like molten glass. "No, no, please," she whispered. "You can't die." Ethan opened his eyes weakly, looking at her with a faint smile. "It's too much," he said softly. "The resonance consumes everything it touches." Lyra grabbed his hand, the glowing mark on her finger reacting again. A pulse of light traveled from her body into his. The cracks on his chest stopped spreading. The light softening, Ethan blinked in surprise. "What are you doing?" "I don't know," she said, "but it feels right." The air shimmered around them, their energies connecting. Blue and white lights spiraled together, creating a calm rhythm. Ethan's breathing steadied, his heartbeat slowing to normal. He sat up slowly, looking at her with wide eyes. "You stabilized the resonance," he whispered. "You shouldn't be able to do that." Lyra looked confused. "Maybe. It's because I'm not human." He nodded slowly, awe mixing with disbelief. "Maybe your species can balance the energy better than ours, for the first time in a long while." Ethan laughed quietly. "The universe really does enjoy surprises." Outside, the fires had gone out. The night was quiet again. The attackers were gone. Only faint traces of blue ash floating in the air. But far above the planet, new signals appeared, bigger ships. Faster ones, closing in. Ethan stood, looking at the sky through the broken roof. "They know I'm alive," he said. "And now they'll bring the council." Lyra's eyes widened. "The Galactic Council?" He nodded. "Yes, and if they discover what we are, they'll erase both of us." She stepped forward, her voice firm now. "Then we run." Ethan looked at her, surprised by her courage. A slow smile formed on his face. "We can't run forever," he said, "but maybe we can change what happens next." As dawn began to rise, the two stood together amid the ruins of the small house. The wind carried the smell of ozone and ash. Lyra looked up at the fading stars, her glowing finger intertwined with his. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. Ethan glanced down at her and said quietly, "The stars gave us this power. Maybe they meant for us to use it together." She nodded, her small voice steady. "Then let's show them what humans and Zenari can do." Far in the distance, the sky flickered with the light of approaching ships. The next battle was coming, but now they were not alone. They were connected by energy older than galaxies, and together they would stand in the shadows of dawn. The legend of the Starborn had begun again. The morning after the battle was calm, but the air still carried the smell of burning metal. Lyra stood on the small hill behind what was left of Ethan's house, watching the twin suns rise over the horizon. Smoke rose in thin columns, glowing gold in the early light. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Ethan walked slowly toward her, his clothes torn, his body still faintly glowing with that soft blue light. He looked tired but alive, his eyes calm, filled with something new peace. "They'll be here soon," he said quietly, looking up at the sky. "The council?" she asked. He nodded. "They won't stop until they know what happened." Lyra turned to him, fear flickering in her wide eyes. "What will you tell them?" Ethan smiled faintly. "The truth, maybe just not all of it." He glanced down at her. "They can never know what you can do, Lyra, not yet." She frowned. "But I helped you. Doesn't that mean they'll trust us?" He shook his head slowly. "No, they'll see you as dangerous, just like they see me." The wind blew softly through the grass, carrying faint echoes of the battle long gone. Lyra looked down at her glowing hand, the mark pulsing like a heartbeat. "And what will we do?" she whispered. Ethan crouched down beside her, his voice gentle. "You'll stay with me, and we'll keep this power hidden for now." He looked toward the sky, where distant lights shimmered faintly, ships descending from orbit. "They'll ask questions. They'll search the area, but they won't find anything." He smiled. "I made sure of that." Moments later, the first ship landed near the clearing. Tall figures in silver armor stepped out, their faces hidden behind masks. The Galactic Council investigators. Ethan stood still, his hands behind his back. Calm as ever, Lyra stayed in the shadows of the broken house. Watching silently, a tall alien officer approached Ethan, his voice sharp and cold. "Terran Ethan Cole. This colony registered an energy burst equivalent to a small reactor explosion. Care to explain?" Ethan tilted his head slightly, pretending to think. "There was an accident," he said. "A supply drone crashed during the night. The radiation from its core caused the explosion." The officer narrowed his eyes, scanning the area with his wrist device. "No trace of a drone, no debris," he said. Ethan smiled politely. "Then it must have vaporized." "Those Terran cores can be unstable?" The officer's eyes flickered with suspicion. But before he could speak again, another council member approached, holding a scanner that emitted faint beeps. "Sir, the starborn signal has vanished." "Completely." Ethan stayed silent, only the faintest hint of relief crossing his face. After a few moments, the officer turned away. "Very well. We will file this as a local accident, but know this. Terran, if we detect that signal again, we will return." Ethan nodded respectfully. "Understood." The officers returned to their ship, the engines roaring as they lifted into the pale morning sky. Lyra stepped out from behind the ruins once they were gone, her small body shaking with relief. "They believed you," she said softly. Ethan smiled faintly. For now, they sat together on the grass, watching the smoke fade and the sunlight rise higher. For the first time since the night she had discovered his secret, there was peace between them. Lyra leaned against his shoulder, her tiny frame barely reaching his arm. "I never thought humans could be so powerful," she whispered. Ethan chuckled quietly. Neither did most of the galaxy. He looked at the horizon, his expression distant. "That's why they fear us." Lyra tilted her head. "But you're not dangerous. You saved everyone." Ethan smiled sadly. "Power doesn't care who uses it, Lyra. It only waits for someone brave enough or foolish enough to try." She fell silent, thinking about his words. The wind moved gently through the grass, the planet peaceful once more. As night returned, the stars came out, glittering across the dark sky. Ethan sat on the porch of what remained of his home, tools scattered around him as he repaired what he could. Lyra brought him tea, sitting beside him quietly. They didn't need to speak. The bond between them was strong now, built from fire and light and trust. After a long silence, Lyra finally asked, "Will you ever use that power again?" Ethan stared up at the stars, his eyes reflecting their light. "Only if I must," he said softly. "But maybe one day. The galaxy will learn that humans don't need to destroy to prove their strength." He looked down at her, smiling. "Maybe we'll teach them that together." Lyra nodded, her small eyes glowing faintly blue, the same color as his, far above them. The Galactic Council ships disappeared into the void, their sensors silent, but the stars themselves seemed to pulse brighter that night, as if they knew their energy lived on not in weapons or machines, but in two souls bound by light and fate. Ethan closed his eyes, breathing deeply. The hum of the resonance echoed faintly around him. Calm, gentle, alive, he whispered softly, "We'll keep it safe, Lyra." "Your secret and mine," Lyra smiled, leaning closer. "Then I'll be your secret keeper," The blue glow between them shimmered once, fading slowly into the night. And as the twin moons rose high above the quiet colony, a new legend was born. The tale of the human who carried the light of dying stars, and the tiny alien maid who kept his secret safe. Together they watched the sky, two small figures against infinity, silent guardians of a power the galaxy had long forgotten.